Welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's September and October edition of Economics in Action, brought to you by the McNair Center for the Advancement of Free Enterprise and Entrepreneurship at Northwood University, and in partnership with Midland Community Television. I'm your host, Mackenzie Kastl. Joining me today is Dr. Timothy Nash, Director of the McNair Center, Strategic Vice President at Northwood University, and Josh Weckesser, Economics student and McNair Scholar. Today we're going to be taking a look at the U.S. economy, a little bit about the Michigan economy, and we'll be analyzing where we're at today. So, Dr. Nash, can you kind of give us a general idea of the U.S. economy right now?
Yeah, I would love to, Mackenzie. If you look at our first slide here, this is a real good analysis of how the American economy works. You know, as we've talked about for quite a bit on this show, the U.S. economy is driven by the entrepreneur and the intrapreneur. And these are individuals either at the private level or the corporate level that are the risk takers that invent the new products, the new services, the new ideas, and bring them to fruition. And so as you think about it today, the American economy is doing quite well. Just recently, the World Economic Forum rated the United States the #1 economy in the world. We had fallen quite a bit. We had dropped to 7. We were at number 3 in 2010, 2011, and just this year, the most recent report came out, and with the economic growth we've been experiencing the last couple of years, and the deregulation, the United States is now the #1 economy in the global economy. If you take a look at the general structure of the U.S. economy, what you see is that on the one hand, right now, the most recent jobs data that was out last week shows that the United States in August had 7.136 million job openings, which was about 650,000 more openings than we had people that are unemployed looking for work. So that's a strong sign. On the other hand, the September jobs number was lower than expected. It was 134,000 new jobs produced. We were expecting about 185,000, so that's about 50,000 jobs off the mark. And yet simultaneously unemployment fell from 3.9 to 3.7%. So there are some mixed signals, but certainly strong signals. U.S. GDP, if you're looking at the St. Louis Fed or GDP now, which is the Atlanta Federal Reserve Bank, that official first number will come out next week. And we're still looking at, from those two organizations, somewhere between 4.1 and 4.5% growth. If that happens, then in the last year, we've had almost 3.7% average growth for the last 4 quarters. And again, that's among the best back-to-back quarters we've had in a long time.
What does consumer confidence tell us about the economy?
Well, I'll tell you, that's a great question. Consumer confidence in September hit one of its highest levels ever. It was up 5 points to 138.4. This is an indicator produced monthly by the Conference Board, which is an organization of major large U.S. corporations. And so, again, it's been a long time since we've been at that level. And then the Small Business Confidence Index, which really measures entrepreneurial activity, was down a little bit in September, but August and September are 2 of the 3 highest levels we've ever had for consumer confidence as it relates to small business people's confidence in the economy. Now there are, it's not that the U.S. economy is perfect. There's some concern on the horizon. If you look at the stock market, as of the 8th of October was up 7.2% for the year. Now, that's a real good level. It's not quite the pace it was on last year. But the difficulty is, in the last couple of weeks between then and now shooting the show, the stock market's down over 1,000 points. And a lot of people are beginning to worry that more stocks in the S&P 500 are down so far this year than are up. And the other thing that I think is important to take a look at is that that yield curve gap between 10-year treasuries and 5-year treasuries is getting closer. And so the U.S. economy again, I think is doing well, but these next couple of weeks between now and the end of October, where we're looking at earnings, it's going to be key. Mm-hmm. There are some stocks that have come in already and the earnings have been quite high. But just this morning, 3M announced that they were adjusting their earnings for an entire year. And 3M is one of our bellwether stocks, so that's something that we need to be concerned about. Next week we release our Chamber of Commerce study, our 2018 Chamber study. It's our 7th annual, and it ranks the Michigan economy versus the rest of the country. Mm-hmm. And so as you look at, the slide that we have up right now, slide 6, is one of the components from that study. And if you're a business and you're looking at doing business in a state, you're going to look at the cost of living. And Michigan has the 4th lowest cost of living. No matter where our viewer is watching the show from, either on YouTube or on MCTV, if you have a relative or if you have a friend or if you're looking to do business, one of the key variables when you look at this overall cost of living index is what's the cost of housing, what's the cost of transportation, the cost of food. And this is all wrapped up. They look at 6 different variables. Our study goes into detail on all 6 of the variables, but we just thought we would throw in a little teaser from the study, and it's interesting as we look at the next couple of quarters and the next year or two. What's the tax rate in your state? What's the GDP growth rate? What's the cost of living? These are all things that are important to businesses and to attract employees to come to your state. When all is said and done, I think right now our greatest concern for the economy right now is what's the relationship between government, households, and business. And right now, we know that there's a real division in Washington, D.C. Republicans and Democrats are not playing well in the proverbial political sandbox. If you think about households and business, they're a little leery about a number of factors. And one of the things that people are most leery about, if you look at slide number 8, is the fact that you go back and you look at the turn of the 20th century. Government at all levels consumed less than 8% of GDP. Today, government consumes at all levels a little over 36% of GDP. And that's a problem. Government is getting, in our opinion, too large, and it's making it more difficult for individuals to have the kind of take-home pay they want, or for businesses, especially entrepreneurs, to start and run a successful small business. And so if you look here at, perhaps one of the most troubling slides is the slide that you see in front of you, which shows the history of the U.S. national debt from the time of the American Revolution today. And what you see is that from 1776 to 1980, our national debt cumulative was less than $1 trillion. We have gone from 1981 to date, and we're at over $21 trillion. And so when you think about the fact that the national debt is $21.6 trillion today, that means if you think about it, in roughly 4 decades, we have run up a national debt of $20.6 trillion. And there's a lot of concern because if you look at the slide closely, the national debt per person, man, woman, and child, is over $65,000. If you look at it per taxpayer, it's almost $180,000 per taxpayer. And the national debt is not getting smaller. If you think about then this last slide, I know there's a lot of data up there, but the thing that's important about this slide is that as the interest rates in the economy go up, the thing that's troubling is the government has to buy borrow money in the same capital markets as everyone else does. And so as those interest rates, especially the long-term interest rates, begin to go up, our interest on the national debt is going to increase. It's now the second largest budget item in the entire federal budget. So when you think about what is going to happen in this particular case, it's a problem. And if we do not begin to get our act together and decide what we're going to do to either raise more revenue, I would prefer growing the economy to raising taxes, because history shows that when you raise taxes, you're going to slow the economy down. The key factor is, how do we get the right mix of incentives to grow the economy and proper spending limits to begin to bring down the national debt? Because in theory, you could bring down the national debt, and as interest rates increase as the economy recovers, you could have a greater interest payment on the national debt, regardless of whether the debt was going up or not. So the thing that I think is important in review is that if you look at the U.S. economy today, it's a strong economy. GDP looks good for the third quarter. There are concerns about what's going to happen in 2019 with the U.S. economy. Certainly the deficit is concerning people. The U.S. economy is very strong relative to the global economy. Europe is having difficulties. China is slowing down. And the U.S. economy, at least so far this year, is showing very strong signs of growth and resilience. There's a chance that we could average 4% GDP growth for this entire calendar year, which would be an exceptional period. The concern that we have, and we've had for a long time, is the growing size and scope of government. What's the Federal Reserve going to do with all the instruments, debt instruments that it purchased to inject money into the economy, to stimulate the economy over the last 10 years? If they begin to decouple that, what that means is they're going to turn around and they're going to take those debt instruments that they're holding, and if they sell those debt instruments to individuals, corporations, pension funds, then those are dollars that come into the Fed and are left out of the economy, which drives interest rates up regardless. And then finally, as we talk about the national debt is over 100% of GDP. It's roughly 105% of our gross domestic product. And that is something that's going to make the economy more difficult to have the kind of growth we've had of late in the future.
You alluded to it briefly, GDP and the importance of third quarter GDP in particular. So we're coming up on reporting. What are you looking for in third quarter GDP?
Well, as I said, I think I'm somewhere between where the Dallas or the St. Louis Fed and the Atlanta Fed happen to be. I think we're probably looking at about 4.2 to 4.4% GDP growth. However, I would not be surprised to see it go either a little below that or a little above that, largely because of how people are adjusting to uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty in terms of the elections coming up in a couple of weeks. People worry that if the Republicans get reelected in terms of holding the House and the Senate, then the worry is that we're going to have another tax cut that will increase the deficit even further. Others argue that if the Democrats can take at least the House, then they're going to do things to curtail the president's activities and potentially start an impeachment process. I doubt that will go very far because of the majority that I think the Republicans will have in the Senate. But the real concern there is that a Democratic Congress begins to try to pare back some of the tax cuts, or tries to reinstitute or reintroduce certain regulations that will slow down the economy. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty, which is part of the reason why the stock market is in a conundrum right now, and that a lot of people are worried about the economy.
Good. Well, you also mentioned one of the things about growing the economy and growing jobs and entrepreneurship, certainly something that we hold very dear at Northwood University and our McNair Center. Josh, I'd like to turn it over to you to present our Entrepreneur of the Month.
Yeah, so this month's Entrepreneur of the Month is going to be Morton Harris. Morton Harris is a founder, co-faunder, and owner of many different companies, probably most notably the American Axle and Manufacturing Incorporated, which is an auto supply giant that was founded in 1994. Mort was born in Detroit on April 11th of 1920, and he attended a school that's now Wayne State. So he really spent time in the Detroit area before joining the military, and went into service into the U.S. Army Air Force. Became an officer, a decorated pilot, highly decorated. He actually earned the nickname the Berlin Kid. And that was because he was recognized for over 33 successful missions flying B-17 flying fortresses over top of Berlin and across enemy lines, which he had more successful missions than an average pilot who flew those things. So he was a hero when it came to that. But some of the different things that the squadron that he was part of, the 95th squadron, was the bomb group. It was unprecedented, the things that they did during World War II. These guys were some of the greatest heroes, some of the toughest guys. And they delivered, I wrote some of the numbers down here, they dropped over 19,769 tons of bombs on enemies during World War II, and then and actually supplied the Allies with 456 tons of food. So these bombers were extremely important during the war, not only for ending the push of Nazi Germany into Europe and against our allies, but also supplying those allies with supplies and medical supplies, different things like that. He achieved the rank of captain, not only being part of the 95th bomb group, he was in the 334th Bomb Squadron of the U.S. 8th Air Force. And once again, just very highly decorated Air Force pilot. After the war, he became an entrepreneur, and one of the companies that he founded, or that he actually purchased in 1952, was the Mercer Corporation, which was a manufacturer of metallurgical products. So he really started diversifying the different areas that he went into when it came to co-founding, when it came to owning different things like that in the business realm. He acquired the Erie Coke and Chain Company out of Erie, Ohio. Once again, a leader in another industry. And then he co-founded Euroroad, which was a trucking company that it provided logistics in Poland for trucks and other types of things. And then also he was the board director of the Michigan National Bank. So he had many different business connections, many different industry connections. Mort was just all over the board when it came to being involved and being really successful. I talked a little bit about AAM, the American Axle and Manufacturing Incorporated, probably one of the most notable companies that he founded, but he founded that private group with a guy named James McLernan and Raymond Park, and they bought the Final Price and the Forge business unit from GM. So they actually developed the supply chain for automotive companies from GM, and then they built it themselves. So they were private investors that were able to build this company up to become the giant that it became. It became the leader in manufacturing of automotive driveline and drivetrain components and systems, and it went public on the New York Stock Exchange in 1999. So they took this company that was just a small sector and blew it up into this giant company, and they really realized the opportunity they had in the economy, and they took that opportunity and made themselves very successful with that.
Well, I know he's a member of the greatest generation, as we refer to them, and I know your father also similarly was a veteran and has done some of the same things in Europe in World War II, and you know Mort personally and have talked about it a little bit. What would you say Mort would call his greatest accomplishment?
Oh, I think that Mort would look at the fact that it was that greatest generation that literally prevented the Nazis from dominating Europe and potentially the world. That really, you think about those 21-year-old flyboys that, I just think about myself at 21 or my son or Josh. When you look at literally leading the arsenal of democracy across the English Channel and defeating Hitler's Nazi Germany. And so I think he would narrowly say that was his greatest accomplishment. But then when you look at what he saw, so many brave soldiers killed, and he saw so many innocent citizens victimized in Europe. And he also knew that we had to readjust the American economy from a war economy to a productive peacetime economy. And so not only did Mort lead the charge to bring freedom to the world, but he also was one of the great entrepreneurs that created jobs both in the United States and, if you note from Josh's presentation, in Europe, in Poland. And that literally is what keeps these countries at peace. If they're trading with each other and they're building their economies, there's a much lower likelihood that they're ever going to go to war. And so, you think about Mort, he's almost 100 years old. You met him up at Bay Harbor, Mackenzie. He's vibrant. He is thoughtful. He is funny. And, I'm at 60, I'm worried about, can I keep up with him? And so you just look at the fact that he's still an entrepreneur, still has his hand in many businesses today at age 98. And so you think about saving the world from fascism and then simultaneously making the world a far better place by generating billions of dollars in gross domestic product and creating tens of thousands of jobs. All the families that are grateful to Mort, from the defeat of Nazism to the bread on their tables and the families that they were able to form because of his risk-taking and successful business leadership.
That's incredible. Josh, as a student, what kind of inspiration can you draw from looking at the success of a life like Mort Harris's?
I think as a student, it's really important to look at not only the story of Mort, but also the accomplishments that he had and his attitude that he always had when he went to battle, when he came back and was starting companies and creating jobs for people. I wrote down a couple of the 3 points that Mort said that the attributes that drive him are humility, kindness, and charity. And I think those 3 attributes are really important for students and for everybody to think about, to not always be thinking about how is this going to benefit me, but as a whole, how is it going to benefit the world and everybody else? I think that was something that was always in Mort's mind. If you look at some of the accomplishments, his company, AAM, their annual sales were $6.9 billion in 2017. But you also look at some of the awards. He's received the Knight by the French Legion of Honor, which is basically the Medal of Honor for the French Republic. And he was awarded this by the President of France, and the ambassador who awarded it to him on behalf of the President of France even noted that no one was more deserving for a medal like this because it was one of the highest honors for acts of heroism because of Mort's involvement in the Battle of Cadillac. And this battle was really important for the French people because he delivered cannons to a city, the city of Footman-Lelis, which is actually one of the major cities that was first taken back when the pushback came, when the Allies landed in Europe and everything and started pushing back against Germany. So things like that, Paris was soon liberated right after that. Different acts that Mort took to make the world better, to always be courageous and always be on the front lines, literally in World War II, and in some of the bloodiest wars. He was involved in the Battle of Bulge. Just taking that as a student and looking at some of the different things, one of the quotes about Mort, or that Mort even said, was, "What good is your success if you cannot share it for the good of others?" And I think as this month's Entrepreneur of the Month, Mort's definitely an entrepreneur that all students, that all people should look at and follow his example, because he really emanated the entrepreneurs that Northwood and everyone in the world wants to see.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, and I think in wrapping up, Mackenzie, one of the things to say about Mort is that not only was he a hero in World War II, not only is he a hero as it relates to job creation and entrepreneurship, but he has literally given tens of millions of dollars to numerous charities to make the world a better place. And so, one of the themes that I think Josh has hit on with now his 5th Entrepreneur of the Month is that we oftentimes don't see in the popular press that most entrepreneurs are not only incredible business leaders, but they're also noted philanthropists. They literally make the world a better place with their charity, not because they have to, but largely because they want to.
That's great. Well, thank you. Thank you both. We're running out of time for today, but if any of the information that we covered today is of interest to you, you can visit our website at mcnair.northwood.edu. As Dr. Nash mentioned, we've honored 5 Entrepreneurs of the Month, and each of those entrepreneurs has been featured in our annual publication, In Defense of Capitalism. You can get a copy of that as well by contacting us at mcnair@northwood.edu or visiting our website and letting us know that you'd like to read more about our entrepreneurs. We also mentioned that next week we're very excited to launch the Michigan Chamber Foundation and McNair Center Competitiveness Study, which analyzes the state of Michigan against the other 49 states. We'll look forward to that. Take a look at the Midland Daily News Economic Outlook, which will be published soon, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you for joining us.